This year I'm presenting you with some tough but important choices.
State budget cut proposals and how they may affect public broadcasting.
Radio and television programming is simply not a core function of government.
This is What Matters. Good evening, I'm Cathy Lewis. I have to admit some discomfort about tonight's broadcast. We're talking about proposed cuts to public broadcasting in the state budget on a public broadcasting program. We run the risk of looking a little self-serving, and I acknowledge that. But it is a public issue, and that's what we do here. So with those disclosures and with your indulgence, we'll give it our best try. This is far from the first time public broadcasting funds have been proposed for elimination at the General Assembly. In 2009, the state legislature proposed a $640,000 reduction to public broadcasters across the state. The legislature added $1 million to the governor's cut, but Governor Kane issued a line item veto for that million and then kept those cuts at $640,000. For WHRO, that meant a cut of a little less than $130,000. Now comes 2011, and Governor McDonnell specifically noted his plan to eliminate entirely public broadcasting funds in his State of the Commonwealth address last month.
Just like families and businesses regularly do, we must look at what works, what doesn't work, what wastes money, what's a smart investment, and fix problems. So this year I'm presenting you with some tough but important choices. Now, I like PBS. It airs a lot of great programs, including, if I don't say so myself, Tonight's Speech. I hope they're still on. But you know, with hundreds of options in the free market, radio and television programming is simply not a core function of government.
We asked to join us tonight Governor McDonnell and Delegate John Cosgrove, who's been a vocal opponent of state funding for public broadcasting, but neither was available. You will not be surprised that Bert Schmidt, who's the president and CEO of WHRO, was very much available. And we're glad he's here tonight, along with Brian Callahan, who's the Chief Education Officer at WHRO. Thanks to both of you for being with us tonight.
Always good to be here.
I know you found your way here very easily, and I appreciate that. So, Bert Schmidt, you know, the governor says, look, it's a tough time for the state budget. We're having to borrow money to fix our roads. Really, it's a hard time for states, not just for Virginia, but across the country. So, is public broadcasting a core function of government, and is it not time to say, times are tough, time to cut?
Well, the funding that's being cut is going to greatly impact the schools. Now, WHRO is owned by the 18 school divisions in Hampton Roads, and we provide services directly into the classroom that are used daily by teachers and by students. These cuts, well, let's back up. We received $872,000 from the state, and we saved schools in Hampton Roads $7.6 million. So we're providing a core government service, which is education, K-12 education, and we're saving taxpayers real dollars through the schools. So I think on both cases we are providing core service and we're saving taxpayers money.
So Governor McDonnell and Delegate Cosgrove and others who are opposed to these cuts frame this as a radio and TV argument. Are you saying that's not legitimate? Well, are you saying that's not appropriate?
If these cuts were to happen, we pay PBS a lump sum. These cuts will not impact whether we're a PBS station or not. And same on the NPR side. We pay for various shows. We are not about to get rid of Car Talk because of these cuts, because we have 22,000 families that are members. We go on the air, we have our pledge drives, and we say support these programs. But educational services, we have a specific contract with the Department of Education, and the schools actually set those priorities of what services they want through this contract. Local programming, like this show, this is not paid for through membership support. This is the kind of thing that commercial television has proven over and over again can't do. And we're the only outlet using public airwaves to have its primary mission be the viewer, to be the audience, not shareholders. And when we're talking about the public airwaves, it seems to me there should be one place on the dial, both TV and radio, that is focused on the public. It's their airwaves.
So you used to be the president of the Harrisonburg station, right, on the campus there of James Madison University. So you've been around this debate before, and you've watched this from a number of different perspectives. How how will this play out across the state? And the question comes because in North Carolina, as you know, they have a system. So I guess it's probably one budget divided out among those.
Well,
stations.
it's one system throughout in North Carolina, in West Virginia, in Pennsylvania, Maryland, not Pennsylvania, but Maryland. Many states around us are one system, often owned by the state. It's a department of the state, so they put significant monies per capita. They put a lot of money into their system, and then they can afford a lot of local programming. But it is the same program schedule throughout the entire state. In Virginia, because it's such a diverse state, well before my time, but I believe the reason it was set up so diversely is because what goes on in Arlington and Bristol are really two different places.
Dramatically different things.
So to try to give the same programming, especially local programming, to both communities probably isn't a good idea, which is why we have 5 stations, if you count Washington, in our state.
But you think it is possible that this will affect different parts of the state in different ways?
Well, certainly. In our case, it's going to impact educational services, local programming, but we will continue to be, but we may be a very different organization. I can tell you, and I can't speak to what's happening today, but when I was in Harrisonburg 3 or 4 years ago, a cut like this would have a dramatic impact on our ability to continue. I mean, it's a third of their budget. Again, it was at least when I was there.
Yeah.
So the question is going to be, how do you, when you eliminate a third of your funding and you have so many fixed costs, transmitting a signal is the same expense whether you're in Norfolk or you're in Harrisonburg. And so our fixed costs for transmission are the same as Harrisonburg, but of course we have a larger base to get monies for.
Right. Brian Callahan, I'm glad you're here tonight because Bert talks about this education funding. That's what you've been up to the state legislature to testify about and to talk about. But I think a lot of people may not be exactly aware of what goes on here beyond this program, beyond our radio programming and that sort of thing. So do the rundown for us, if you will.
Sure. I always like to characterize it as an iceberg. Most people above the waterline, they know us for all our broadcast properties, our radio and our television. Below the waterline is everything we do in education. And we look at it as 4 pillars. The first pillar is ready to learn. We do lots of activities related to getting children prepared to go to school, so that, as Bert said, our 18 owner members don't have to start to remediate immediately, that they're able to instruct when a child comes to their school. Second, we do online teacher training. Have about 1,500 teachers a year that go through 15, 30, 45-hour-long courses. They need that recertification. They have to get 180 hours every 5 years. We provide that online. We also do online student courses. We are under contract, run the Virtual Virginia operation for the State Department of Education.
And Virtual Virginia is basically a virtual high school, right?
It's not just a high school, it's an advanced placement and world languages high school. So you talk about equity in offering any school division anywhere in the Commonwealth, any student there can take a course through that and have access to nearly 40
And all
courses.
that comes out of here.
It all comes out of here. They handle all the teachers and all the other aspects of it, curriculum and all that, but we do all the operations out of here. And, you know, when you think about it, they can take Algebra 1, they can take Chinese 1 through 3, they can take advanced placement courses, etc. Now, the fourth thing that we do is digital media distribution. We started 50 years ago as a public broadcasting entity with 2 school divisions shaking hands saying we're going to put a teacher on TV. Well, we don't do it that way anymore. As a matter of fact, we don't broadcast any instructional television program anymore. We still do all of our Sesame Streets and all the ones that you know of for our early childhood. But our instructional programming now is all delivered online.
Really?
Yeah, and that's a big area that we're in. It's the #1 service that we provide to schools, and obviously a good bit of the funding that we're talking about here would affect that.
No. I'm sorry if I sound surprised by this, but you know, as you said, tip of the iceberg, we work in one business and this stuff goes on, and some of this is sort of, I'm kind of getting it for the first time, so thank you for that. So when you say that would have an effect on that, what do you mean?
Well, we obviously use those funds. As Bert mentioned, we leverage a 7-to-1 return on investment. So what we do is pool funds and we buy things on a group purchase basis, other ways for efficiency. So for example, we help develop online courses for our own online high school. When we develop those courses, why would we develop Algebra 1 18 different times. We develop it once through this operation, and then we give that course back to the individual school divisions to localize it, add content, do whatever they would like with that course. But think about the cost that we save. To develop a course is not an inexpensive operation. It could cost as much as $100,000. We develop it once rather than 18 times.
So as you look at these, the prospect of these cuts, and I don't think anybody's particularly surprised that this is the case. I mean, we've known that some aspect of cutting was coming, and that sort of seems to be the way of the world at the moment. But as you think about that 7-to-1 argument, how is that playing when you talk to people about that?
Well, I think it plays pretty well. I think you've seen a number of articles in our local paper by people who are very familiar with our services and really are users of our services, and not the school people, but that are parents of children or grandchildren that use our services, and they know. And I think that plays very well when you get right down to it, because if you cut $1 from us, you're really taking the rest of the money out of the system. So it's not just that you cut $1 to us, you are also removing all of those savings, that 7-to-1 savings.
And Bert, you've been to make this argument at the state legislature.
Yes.
How's it going over?
I think most people understand that we speak to, they get it all of a sudden. Many folks who are opposed to our funding simply say they don't like that TV show or that radio show and let's eliminate it without really understanding the full breadth. So we're having a lot of success with talking to the legislators and explaining. We've had a number of folks into the building. Brian's done a little demonstration of what these services are very specifically. And we explain that, I mean, we are the best example of regional cooperation in Hampton Roads. I mean, to get 18 schools to sit down, just a couple of days ago, we had all the superintendents here around the table for a number of hours in the morning talking about all sorts of strategic issues for the schools in Hampton Roads, working together as a body, where a superintendent would even say, you know what, this may not be the best for my school, but I appreciate that it's best as a region, and ultimately, the tide will rise for all of us. Occasionally, I may make a decision that's not good for me now, but it will be in the long run.
And so as you look at the way this debate, because I know you have colleagues all over the country that you talk to on a regular basis, as you look at how this is playing out around the country, obviously I suspect Virginia's not the only place where public broadcasting funds have been targeted for either reduction or elimination. What are they telling you about how, because a lot of them would not have the same story to tell that this place does. Do you have the sense that any of their arguments are meeting with success?
Well, I think, I can't speak specifically about their direct interactions, but I think what we're getting is we're getting hung up in some politics between perhaps liberals and conservatives, and people trying to label public broadcasting as being, perhaps liberal.
Public broadcasting, yes.
And I ask people, take it to the next step, give me the examples. I mean, is Sesame Street liberal? Cares about kids. Is What Matters liberal? I've never heard anybody accuse you of being left or right. In fact, we've had programs that may be biased one way or the other that I've taken off the air, much to the chagrin of people on the left and the right, because what we want to bring are programs that are clearly what they are supposed to be. Now, we'll bring an independent lens or POV.
That has a specific point of view.
They have a point of view, but a program that is supposed to be public affairs or straight up, we do our best to make sure that these programs don't have a bias unless it's clearly from the beginning.
Yeah. I'm sure you are fully aware that this will be an issue at the federal level and in Congress as well. Certainly there was the situation with Juan Williams this past fall, which at least by the analysis, seems to suggest that that's going to be a very popular topic for conversation.
Sure, yeah, it's unfortunate. The situation with Juan Williams was he was on Fox News, made some comments, and NPR decided to let him go. We can debate the rationale. NPR says, and I believe them, that he became more he was giving opinions as opposed to being a journalist. And NPR has those reasons they don't want those kind of folks representing NPR. The fact of the matter is, it's when you cut at the federal level, you're not cutting NPR, you're cutting stations funding. And so while NPR gets very little federal funding, the funding would come straight here and impact programs like Hearsay. So I think everybody in the system understands that the handling of that personnel matter was handled very poorly. There's nobody defending how
right in the middle of the pledge period for radio stations across the country.
Yes,
not the best timing. Yeah.
But there's a difference between a poor HR matter at a national level and your local stations, and hurting the local station because of a poorly handled HR issue.
It occurs to me, this whole liberal conservative thing, and we hear this out in the community as well, of course. it occurs to me that at a national level, the system doesn't do a very good job of talking about that and addressing it. I wonder if you would agree with
that.
me.
I think we scratch our heads a little bit because, and I have conversations with people and I try to understand, point to me where the liberal part is. And I think sometimes we confuse intellectual with liberal. Sometimes people say, well, it's smart programming. It's you're going to spend a whole hour talking about a topic. I mean, there's no commercials. It's not what you find along the dial. I mean, you get engaged. Your brain has to be turned on to watch many of our programs. And sometimes people will say, well, that's, you're too highbrow. You're too this
elitist.
Or that. Elitist. Yeah. And then they turn that language into, they call it liberal all of a sudden, as opposed to, and I'll apologize for presenting intellectually stimulating programming. That's what we want to do. So I don't apologize for that, but I would challenge people when it comes down to whether it's liberal or not. It's not. There's no conservative bent as far as I'm concerned.
And if I can pick up on that point from an educational perspective, Bert doesn't like to hear this a lot, but I got involved with public broadcasting 25 years ago. I've been in public broadcasting from an educational perspective in 3 different states. And it has nothing to do. Algebra 1 is not a political issue. You teach Algebra 1.
It's just a hard issue.
It's a hard issue. I agree with that. Exactly. And that's why we're giving kids even better ways to do that these days. But the fact is that the aspect of the organization in which I work and which all of our superintendents are engaged every single day are about educating children. It's not about
completely
a left or a
apolitical.
right. Completely apolitical. And so that's a very interesting issue when you start to get down to the educational aspects.
And we should note that the education services in many cases are contracts.
That's absolutely correct.
So these are fully funded in many respects, contracts. So as you look to the future, and there's been a lot of conversation about that, certainly I think a lot of states and some states have already eliminated those funds. A couple states, right?
Yes, some states don't fund,
As you look to the future, what are some of the other funding models that people are talking about? Because I think there's some level of recognition that funding, if it's not eliminated, will certainly not, in most cases, look like it does today. I mean, that's a realistic. If a lot of governors are talking about cutting it, one assumes that some will be successful.
Well, I think those cutting us, they're not offering up suggestions of what that model is going to be. The beauty of our model now is, in our case, we have a $13 million budget, and the largest line item is our members. It's about $3 million, 22,000 people. We have underwriters, we have entrepreneurial activities, tower rentals, those kind of things. And we have educational activities that bring monies in. To eliminate a complete line, taxpayer support, which is about 15% of our total budget. Of course, we would hope for more local community support, more government support, or more corporate support, but at the end of the day, you start becoming more and more commercial in your mindset. Because at the end of the day, I've still got to pay. I'm in business like everybody else. I've got 100 people that work here that expect a paycheck every 2 weeks. So we've got to make sure we can make that payroll. So money's got to come in, and all of a sudden you chop out the 15%. That budget still has to balance. We still have budgets like every other corporation, and so you will have to make cuts. You will, of course, try to find other sources of revenue. But historically, what we find, and we've seen this in the past with major cuts, you'll get a little upswing in member support. But then it starts to level back down to where it was. There's a natural place in our business. About 1 in 10, 1 in 9 viewers, in this case, are members. And boy, if we could change it to 2 out of, I don't want to get into pledge drive right now, but we find there's a little rise for a while and then it levels off. But the more we rely on corporate underwriters, the more it looks like commercial TV.
So what do you say to the person who says, you know what, Bert, as the governor did, I love what you do. Nobody's arguing. It's great stuff. Private sector will pick that up. Look at National Geographic. Look at Arts and Entertainment. Look at History Channel. Look at the Military Channel. I mean, there are any number of cable channels out there that are doing some of the programming that's similar in nature to what PBS is doing.
You say that. Let's look at Arts and Entertainment as an example. One, it's not Arts and Entertainment anymore. It's A&E. They've eliminated the words Arts and Entertainment. It has become really a reality show station. History Channel, the most viewed program, Ice Road Truckers. And so you start looking deeper into the names sound like they're competitive, but when you start diving into them, Bravo, you can go start listening to all these competitive channels, and they start out with great missions. They really want to take a niche of what we've been doing. Then they realize the commercial world doesn't work, and then they've got to kind of dumb it down. And there's stuff that's great out there. You pick and choose a little bit, but it's not what we do.
So I get that it's not what we do, but there's an argument that says if that's what the market wants, then that's what we will deliver, because that's what commercials will pay for to support. So there's a government argument that says that's what people want. The free market has spoken.
Well, I mean, you could take that to the extreme with lots of issues. I think because the airwaves are owned by the public, that they deserve one broadcaster that cares more about the public than they do about shareholders. Now, I have no problem. I love commercial TV. I watch a lot of it. I think there's a lot of great stuff, but it's not locally owned for the most part. The big corporations own these stations. We are locally owned here in Hampton Roads, and we answer to the people. I mean, I can't blame anybody else for the decisions we make. PBS doesn't own us, NPR doesn't own us, the buck stops with us. And that's a rare circumstance. You can't go down the street and talk to the other presidents or people who run stations. They've got somebody above them who are making those decisions.
And from a ready-to-learn standpoint, nobody out there in the commercial marketplace does the depth, quality, or quantity of true educational, entertaining program that PBS does and WHRO does. And so, therefore, if there was some kind of a commercial model for it, you'd think it would exist in the marketplace already. But you can't stick commercials in the middle of some of these truly educational programs. And I mean, you know what we're talking about. The Cat in the Hat knows a lot about that. Sid the Science Kid, Curious George, Sesame Street, I can just go on down the list. But those properties are truly educational, and when they have to be converted into a commercial world, I'm not so sure that that's going to translate. I think you're going to lose those.
And I've heard people say that Sesame Street makes tons of money, all these products all over the place. Well, boy, can't you live off of that? Well, one, Sesame Street would not have been founded 40-plus years ago without a non-commercial model because it was never tested before. Yes, Sesame Street could go off.
So it would have gone through sort of focus groups and all that.
Well, yeah, we're going through all the commercial process, and we haven't seen something like a Sesame Street anywhere else. Sesame Street is the most important television show in the history of TV. It has changed the generations of how generations have learned because of Sesame Street. You cannot point to a commercial station, a commercial program that's ever done that. Today, yes, it's wildly successful from a commercial standpoint. Lots of products, Elmo's out there, Bert and Ernie's and all this stuff. But CTW, the Children's Television Workshop, is a separate entity. PBS actually doesn't have to pay anymore to the Children's Television Workshop for the program. We can get it without investing a lot of money into the program because of all the commercial sales.
Well, I tell you, it will be very interesting to see where this goes, and I guess you're heading back to the legislature every chance you get, early and often, as they say.
That's right.
And of course, your colleagues across the state doing the same thing. Yeah, wow. All righty then. Well, you know, it's a tough issue, and we'll see where it goes. I want to thank both of you for walking down the hall to be with us.
Yeah, the commute was tough.
And you for walking downstairs, Brian. Well done. I'll be back in a moment with a final thought. As I said at the top of this broadcast, it's awkward to talk about cuts to public broadcasting on a public broadcasting program, and I can understand that some will have a problem with our even covering the story at all. But I knew we would be covering it when, in the State of the Commonwealth address, after announcing the elimination of public broadcasting funds, the governor quipped that he hoped they didn't shut him off in his live telecast. In fact, we didn't, and neither did WCVE in Richmond or Blue Ridge Public Broadcasting in Southwest Virginia or WETA in Arlington. But I did quickly switch channels to see if I could find the governor's speech on any of the free market commercial television stations that we're often told will pick up where public broadcasting leaves off. And do you know how many were carrying the governor's speech? I couldn't find one. One network affiliate had a program called Inside Edition, whose top headline this week is Who Got Overlooked in Oscar Nominations. Another carried Entertainment Tonight. Still another carried Wheel of Fortune. Now, if you buy cable television, your options are greater. You could have enjoyed 2.5 Men, Judge Joe Brown, Funniest Home Videos, Ghost Hunters, a Seinfeld rerun, or my personal favorite, a show called Monsters Inside Me. A look at what happens when human beings fall prey to parasites. It isn't pretty, and neither are the choices for citizens seeking the tools to participate in public life. Don't get me wrong, my cable remote gets a workout, landing with fairly regular frequency on shows all across the spectrum, some admittedly more shallow than others. But let's not kid ourselves. When it comes to local public affairs programming, The free market has walked away because it isn't profitable. And why wouldn't they? An infomercial about buying foreclosed property brings many more dollars and far fewer expenses than shows like this. It is in part about business models and how we line up incentives. It is in part about how we engage people in the fine art of citizenship. It is in part about whether and how we're going to shine a credible light on the people and ideas for which there are no sponsors to be found. The truth is that public broadcasting has been forced to wean itself off public funding for years now. That's why you see more of those underwriter announcements. But it's a process, not an event. And if we reduce the conversation to funding or ideology, we'll miss a great opportunity to think about what we value about public broadcasting. If the list is fulsome enough, we can plan for a successful transition instead of cutting off the system at its knees. Now, my guess is that next year, when Governor McDonald delivers his State of the Commonwealth address, Virginia's public television and radio stations will still carry it because that's what we do. But we'll have to figure out what we won't do to make that happen. That's not manipulation, it's just reality. And coming soon, we'll get to watch the drama play out on the national stage, where the focus will be ideology and the stakes will be much bigger. You may have a different idea, and that too is what we're all about. So if you'd like to be in touch, just log on to our website, whatmatters.tv. Don't forget to join us on Facebook as well, and on the radio for more local talk. In case you're screaming at your television right now, save it up and join us for Hearsay. That's on 89.5 WHRV FM. We're live each weekday at noon, and we will take your calls, I promise. Thanks again for watching. I'm Cathy Lewis. We'll see you next time for another look at what matters.